Good day. Welcome to this recording to help you guys, girls and humans, navigate the first declension. Um, in the last week, we discussed the idea of cases as being really critical to understanding and using Latin nouns. And we're now going to carry that forward with learning about the idea of nouns belonging to declensions and seeing how the case system operates with the first declension, which logically will be the first one for us to learn. All right, you guys and people are aware of the woohoo idea of the cases. Um, have you firmly memorized their order? I hope so. Um, by the way, here's a suggestion. Because this is a video, you can pause the video. You can also go back to listen to things that you have heard before. But why don't you pause the video now and see if you can remember the names of the cases in order. All right, how'd you do? Did you use the mnemonic device that we discussed last week? The textbook's version, never give dogs any abuse, is a way to remember the nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative in order. Now, one other thing I'm going to make note of is that there is another case which we will be talking about and making use of pretty regularly when we go forward. It is called the vocative case. It is used when you're calling an individual by name or some other descriptive term. Um, and, and how do I want to say this? Our textbook doesn't give a lot of emphasis to it, but it exists. And when we move on to choosing Latin names and using Latin names in our conversations, you guys will see the vocative case in use. For now, if you want to, all I'm asking you to do with the vocative is add it into the list of the 6 cases. Never give dogs any abuse, Vicky. And you can change the name Vicky to Victor or Vincent or some other name. But I want you find folks to notice that when we add on a comma at the end of a sentence and then a person's name, we are engaging in direct address, which is the job of the vocative case, to let a person know you're talking to him or to her and aiming to have that person take an action. All right, declensions as a concept. Um, this is going to sound a little bit strange to you, but uh, after reading page 9 in the textbook, maybe not so much. A declension is a group of nouns which share a particular pattern of endings. Latin has several declensions. We're going to learn the first declension first. But the idea of a declension is something of an adjustment process for us in English because we don't exactly have them. The closest we have to them is some of the different systems we have for making nouns plural. So if you have a pan or a can or even tan, like I had a nice tan this summer, the way we make that plural is by adding an S. And in a different category of nouns are words like man or woman. Those are generally the two, where instead of making it plural by adding S, we make it plural by changing the vowel in the word. We say men and women, changing the A in man to an E. Similarly, we have the good old-fashioned normal noun house. We make it plural by adding S, but we don't do so with mouse. Instead, we changed it to mice. So declensions, they're not a perfect fit for how we think of nouns in English. but they are a perfect fit for Latin, and we're going to need to learn them. Um, Latin nouns in general, okay, always belong to a specific declension. Um, I'll let you guys know. Mars, for example, the name of the god of war, Mars is third declension. On the other hand, in the sentence Mars est Deus, Deus belongs to the second declension. Now, we're not worried about the second and third declension at this point in time. We're worried about the first. But as a big picture idea, it's important to know that Latin nouns always belong to one of the declensions, and that the noun's declension is signaled by its genitive form. That's true with the first declension, woohoo, which we are meeting here in chapter 1. First declension nouns always have a genitive singular form that ends in AE, that magical diphthong AE, which is pronounced I. And the genitive form, just to clarify, is the second form in the vocab entry. So after agricola, the second form, agricolae, ending in AE, is the genitive. After poeta, poetae, that second form ends in AE and is the genitive. All right. We have not seen an exception to this rule, but sorry, I don't want to say an exception to this rule. We haven't seen any first declension nouns that have a nominative singular form ending in anything other than A, but there are a few. All of the nouns that we're meeting in this lesson, this chapter, from Agricola all the way down to Roma and beyond, the nominative singular form ends in the letter A. But that ending A is not the consistent, reliable marker of these nouns' declension. It's the genitive singular form that ends in AE. All right, the vast majority of first declension nouns are feminine in gender. And we talked last week about gender being not a matter of biological sex, but a matter of grammatical categories. Well, there's a little bit of an overlap between biological sex and grammatical categories when it comes to the first declension nouns that refer to professions. So agricola, atleta, poeta. In the ancient Roman world, and also in the ancient Greek world, those professions were held by men. And because they were held by biologically male people, um, these nouns were flipped over into the masculine gender. There are also going to be some names that you encounter later in your education. The names of Roman men, the philosopher Seneca, the Emperor Caligula, um, the Emperor Caracalla. Their names end in A and have a genitive in AE. They're first declension, but masculine. But as a general rule of thumb, and it's a big thumb, first declension nouns are going to be feminine. Okay. All right. So you have seen on page 9 in the textbook, a chart with the forms of the word lupa in um, order from nominative singular all the way down to ablative plural. Those endings are movable. The pattern of endings, AE, AE, AM, long A in the singular, AE, arum, is, as, is, they're actually easier to say than to spell. These are the endings of the first declension, and they must be memorized. They must be memorized in order. The macrons are important. Some of them make the difference between right answers and wrong answers, especially here on the ablative singular. Get that laser pointer in order. That macron makes the difference between right and wrong. And you fine folks need to get to work in memorizing them in order. It's possible to just memorize the endings. I, is, as, is. It's possible to remember them attached to a noun, the noun of your choosing, whether it's lopa or here terra. Terra, terrae, terrae, terram, terra, terrae, terrarum, terris, terras, terris. Work on orally practicing them, work on writing them, both as endings and attached to a noun in order. Now, some of you may start to question, why do certain endings repeat? Okay. That's a topic that's better held in discussion rather than a recorded lecture. So in our upcoming class sessions, we'll talk about the repetition, for example, of the ending AE in the genitive singular and then the dative singular, and then also up here in the nominative plural. But for now, work on memorizing these. They are of massive importance going forward. Now, the job of the endings is to show a particular noun form's function in its Latin sentence. We had that broad introduction to cases as indicating a noun's function in the sentence last week. And we further learned, worked to learn that the two jobs of the nominative case are to indicate that a noun is functioning as the subject or as a predicate nominative, and that the job of the accusative case is to function as the direct object. That's 100% true, but the other cases have functions as well. In the table that you see on the screen, and also this is something you can see in the textbook as well, we can assign meanings to each form that regularly involve adding prepositions to the genitive, to the dative, and the ablative. We add in English prepositions to say of the poet, for example, to or for the poet, by or with the poet. Again, running through the genitive, dative, and ablative in order. These English prepositions of to/for, by/with are ways in English that we indicate a noun's function in the sentence. Okay? The genitive case, as we'll learn later, is used to show possession. So if we were to say the writings of the poet are famous, we'd use poetae in the genitive. And that's the main job of the genitive. Not that I'm supposed to tell you that right now, but it's to show possession or ownership. The same patterns of prepositions and case use occur for the plural forms of the poets in the genitive, to or for the poets in the dative, by or with the poets in the ablative. With the nominative and accusative, we don't need any English prepositions in front of those because when we are speaking in English, our subjects and predicate nominatives on the one hand and our direct objects on the other, we don't put prepositions in front of them. Okay, we are almost done, but I did want to tack on, even though we're not going to be learning this as a formal idea in the written work in chapter 1, I wanted to present to you a brief discussion of the vocative case. Vocative comes from the Latin verb vocat, which we'll learn later means calls. Vocat means he or she calls. And this case has one use directly related to vocat. It's used when the speaker calls a person by name or title. Now, that can happen anywhere in a sentence. I can say, Bill, your shoe is untied. Or I can say, your shoe is untied, Bill. Or I can say, your shoe, Bill, it's untied and you're falling down the stairs. Sorry, that poor Bill. Um, we can call someone by name or some kind of title anywhere we want to in an English sentence. One can do that also in Latin, but when one does it in Latin, the form of their name needs to be expressed in the vocative case. For first declension nouns, and also third declension nouns, which we'll be learning down the road, the vocative case form is identical to the nominative. So puella, if I were to say, hi girl, how's it going? I'd say salve puella, no change in form. Same for the name Caesar or Rex, um, two Latin names that we will talk about later. But when we start introducing second declension names, um, and we'll be doing that when you find folks choose Latin names for use in class. Some of you, typically male, are going to choose second declension names that end in US or IUS. These have different vocative case forms. Now, there is no reason for us to worry about this too terribly much, except I want to set the groundwork for you hearing slightly different forms of these second declension names when we move forward. But for now, let's just call Romulus and Remus by name and say, Romula, Rema, stop fighting, don't kill one another. That's how brothers are sometimes, and that's in fact how the story ends up. But we'll get on to that later. All right, thanks for listening. You finish your note taking process, and woohoo, we'll see you in class on Wednesday.